in 2015, Andrew Little stood up and gave a keynote address to a business audience where he said that he wanted us to undertake a piece of work called the Future of Work Commission. We set up a commission that included an external reference group. We brought people from across business, union movements, ICT companies, just a whole range of people. And then we opened up for submissions. We had 500 submissions talking about the future of work across everything from education, skills, technology, partnering with Māori and iwi, sustainable development, small business, you name it, someone had a view on the future of work in that area. So we got a range of brilliant submissions. And in 2016 ran a conference where we brought in Robert Reich, a guy called Guy Standing, who's done a lot of work on universal basic incomes. He was a bit of a really challenging speaker for us. Jan Owen from Australia, who works a lot on youth and youth transitions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And all of that culminated in this report, The Future of Work, which has in it over 60 recommendations that we put out there to say these are the kinds of things that we will do when we're in government to try and better prepare ourselves for those future technological challenges. We export $6.3 billion worth of ICT products in New Zealand. Massive room for growth, but not really a focus for us currently. So our view was if we set ourselves a target for ICT to be the second largest contributor to GDP, a little government focus on this area could make an enormous amount of change. One more I'll just touch on, and that's the Enterprise Investment Scheme. Particularly close to my heart, I'm the small business spokesperson. And one of the problems we've got in New Zealand is that we tend to invest in bricks and mortar. We go for safe options. Lots of good reasons for that. One's called the 1980s. And so, you know, forestry, housing, safe stuff, that's what attracts our dollar, in part because we've got incentives for people doing that as well. There's very few incentives for people to invest in the productive parts of our economy, particularly small business. Now, if you're a small business owner and you want to grow your business, you've got a couple of options. One is you leverage off your home if you own one. Increasingly, our young entrepreneurs are not going to have that option. Your second option are your friends and your third option are your family. And what do they get out of it other than risk? So one of the things that we want to do is look at things like seed enterprise investment funds, which they use overseas. It's basically, at its simplest form, you set a bit of quick criteria for the kind of businesses you want to see supported in your economy, and you give people a tax break if they invest in them. We've got 90,000 young people in New Zealand not in employment, not in education, not in training. That's increased by about 20,000 in the last couple of years. So that's a big number. That's a lot of young people. And if you add to that the fact that they're also moving into an environment where increasingly their competition in the workplace is not just from the person sitting next to them in their training program, it's someone in an entirely different country, that they're going to be forced to collaborate much more often, that they might be forced also to cobble together multiple jobs in order to make a full wage, and that they're facing an environment where those low-wage, low-skilled jobs are being replaced by automation. So we have to both grab that as that challenge as an opportunity and make sure at the same time that we're still meeting the kind of the desires of the millennial going into the workforce, because they are a different cohort of workers than what we've seen before. Our education system has to fundamentally change. And the biggest change I think we need to make to our education system is it's not a destination with an end point anymore. Education will have to become a conveyor belt that is continuous, that all of us will dip in and dip out of through the courses of our careers, particularly for that next generation who are facing upwards of 3 years before they end up working in the job that they trained for, that will face having up to 7, not different jobs, potentially different careers in their lifetime. One of the other things though that we want to do is make sure that at the point that someone is leaving school, because we won't necessarily get this, whiz-bang plan for every single student, but at the point that they leave, we need to make sure everyone has a plan for either earning or learning. Everyone. One of the wider schemes we've talked about is something called Ready to Work, where some of the young people just need an opportunity to build up skills, work ethic, get a bit of training under their belt. We want to work in partnership with employers where we pay 6 months worth of wages to give people that start. We want to make sure that they're getting something out of it as well, some training along the way. Maybe they need a driver's license too. Well, that's something that we can step in and make sure that we help them achieve. But it's just being much more open-minded about that first step. So that's called the Ready to Work scheme, and I think it will be really valuable as well. What I've touched on are only 2 chapters of about 6 or 7. So a lot of ideas in the future of work that have come out that I think worthy of you taking a little bit of a look. And if you have other thoughts, particularly relevant to your sector, please let us know. I'll leave the futureofwork.nz as the place where you can find everything about that. I don't know what's changed along the way. Maybe it's because I came from a small town, but my experience was that, it wasn't unusual to have a job at 14. You might be packing at a supermarket, or you might be sweeping the floors. I cleaned at a gift shop. I worked at a fish and chip shop. Yeah, I do. That's the thing. I do think that has changed. And so for us, it was about how do we then plug that gap that used to exist, that used to give those opportunities to young people. That's what we were trying to do with Ready to Work. So we were looking at partnering with local councils, with the Department of Conservation, with NGOs, but frankly, I think we should be pretty open-minded about who we partner with and say, it's got to be legitimate work. We are looking for opportunities that otherwise aren't paid jobs necessarily, but it still has to feel meaningful. You don't want to demoralise a young person by putting them in a work that feels like clearly a make-work scheme. But paying them a wage for 6 months so that then straight off the bat they've got something on their CV where they can demonstrate that they've worked in a role, someone's given them experiences, written them a reference and got them started. I'd say that we probably also have that same issue with some of our sole parent workforce who might have been out of work for a period of time as caregivers. It's not necessarily that they don't have experience, but man, the number that I talk to that have taken a knock to their confidence. I've seen overseas example where they've partnered with large organisations who just actually exist as a way of bridging that confidence gap to try and get them back into the workplace. So yeah, I think it's about us being much more creative. Everyone will have had someone who either inspired them or they felt completely discouraged by. I mean, the impact of teachers can be phenomenal. I still think, it's one of our totally undervalued sections of our society, and actually that's part of it. We've got some really specific problems with teaching in Auckland that, with the wages and salaries that our teachers earn, our schools are having a really hard time recruiting and retaining teachers. And that's before you even get into some of the subject areas that we need them to specifically be in. So yes, some of it will be about trying to make it a viable option and feel like a viable option. Some of it might be, bonding what we do with people's student loans, scholarships. Some of it will be about what we do to inspire our existing teaching workforce and professional development to get up to speed with some of these really rapidly changing areas. So the work that, say, Frances Valentine is doing via Mind Lab, where short courses and programs for teachers already out in the workforce, really inspirational courses that allow them to make sure that they are on top of their game as well. So some of that PD is really important, but actually we don't give teachers enough release time. We don't support them to do that professional development at the moment. So it's a big gap as well. But overall, for me, it's around how do you make a workforce, a career choice, seem exciting and valued and challenging? And that's probably a bit more of a national conversation, what we need to do. We have great ambassadors. We have some people like Michelle Dickinson who are encouraging particularly women to go into engineering fields. Probably need to try and give that kind of profile to our teaching community again, because it's incredibly important.